guys. So I'm going to be doing a read aloud. This is a chapter book, so we'll actually kind of take the whole week to read through it. You can listen to it all at once, or if you want to break it into each day, listen to a little bit, that's okay too. It's kind of whatever works best for you. So we're going to be reading the book called I Survived the San Francisco Earthquake, 1906. So this book is historical fiction, which means it takes place in the past, but it's made up. These events of this specific character did not actually happen. There actually was a terrible, huge earthquake in San Francisco in 1906. That's true. But the actual story that we're going to read, the author just made it up based on what they know about the earthquake. So, the author is Lauren Tarshish, and if you look at the title of our folder, it has the Accelerated Reader Test Number. Chapter 1, April 18th, 1906, Rincon Hill at 5:12 a.m., San Francisco, California. So this story is taking place in California on the other side of the country, and this is really early in the morning. The sky was still dark when the ground began to shake. Most people in San Francisco were still sleeping. Just a few were awake. Shopkeepers arranged their stores, getting ready for the day. Carriage drivers fed their horses. Newsboys ran down the sidewalk to pick up the newspapers to sell. An 11-year-old Leo Ross was in a broken-down building high on Rincon Hill. When the rumbling started, Leo thought it might be thunder. He had no idea that deep below the city, two gigantic pieces of earth were pushing past each other. Powerful shocks exploded up through the underground layers of dirt and rock. All across the city, streets ripped open, buildings swayed, walls crumbled, and houses came crashing down. Broken glass, hunks of wood, and piles of bricks tumbled into the streets. Leo stood in shock as the floor beneath him rose and fell like ocean waves. Hunks of plaster hit him on the head. Windows shattered, spraying him with glass. He tried to scream, but his throat was covered with dust. He wanted to run, but he couldn't even stand. The shaking was too hard. And then there was a sound like an explosion. The ceiling above his head burst open. A brick hit him smack on the back, and then another thud hit him in the shoulder. Crash! Dozens of bricks poured down. Leo fell to the floor and curled into a ball. The bricks kept coming, raining down. He couldn't see and he could barely breathe. Chapter 2, 20 hours earlier. Okay, so that was kind of like a prequel. It's telling you what's coming, but now we're going to rewind a little bit. President Roosevelt is coming to town, Leo shouted. Read all about it. Leo was standing on his corner selling that morning's newspaper. The sidewalk was crowded with men rushing to work. They barely slowed down as they handed Leo their nickels and grabbed the newspaper from his hands. It was barely 7 o'clock in the morning and Leo had sold almost all of his papers. He jingled his pockets, which were heavy with coins. He thought about the fresh roll he'd buy for breakfast and maybe even some cold milk to wash it down with. He smiled to himself. Papa would have been proud of him. Leo patted his right-hand trouser pocket and felt the gold nugget that he always kept with him. It didn't look like much, kind of like a chewed-up yellow rock, but it was worth a fortune, Leo knew. Probably he could get more money for it than he earned in months of selling papers. But he'd rather sell his heart than this gold nugget. Leo's grandfather had found it in a riverbed east of here during the gold rush. He'd handed it down to Papa, who had carried it with him everywhere. Grandpop got sick and died before Leo was born, but Papa kept him alive through the stories he'd tell to Leo. Each night when Papa was putting Leo to bed, he'd take out the gold nugget. Leo would hold it tight in his hand as Papa told tales of Grandpop's adventures. Crossing America all alone in a creaky old wagon, almost getting eaten by a giant grizzly in the Rocky Mountains, surviving a forest fire in the Sierras, and living in San Francisco when it was just a bunch of rickety houses in the mud. You're just like your grandpop, Pop always said. I see it in your eyes. You've got his good luck. You've got his guts. Something remarkable is going to happen to you. I can feel it, can't you? And the way Papa would look at him with shining eyes, Leo did feel it. These past few months since the fever took Papa away, there had been days when sadness would surround Leo, a feeling as cold and gray as the San Francisco fog. He'd feel scared and very alone. He'd miss Papa so bad his whole body would hurt. But then he would think of Grandpop, who made his way from New Hampshire to California all by himself when he was just 16 years old. And he'd hear Papa's voice in his mind, bright and clear, telling him that he was lucky and brave and that something remarkable was going to happen to him. Papa's voice was loud and clear on this sunny day. Or it was until Leo finished selling papers. He was walking down an alley, cutting through to Market Street. Somehow he didn't notice the two boys who crept up behind him. The next thing Leo knew, he'd been smashed against a brick wall. "Hand it over," said a raspy voice. Leo didn't have to see the face to know who was talking. It was Fletch Sykes, the most brutal thief in the neighborhood. The other kid had to be Wilkie Barnes, a giant of a boy who went everywhere that Fletch did. When Fletch was just 5 years old, the story went, he'd been attacked by a pack of stray dogs. He'd survived, but one of the dogs had bitten his throat, and the bite ruined his voice and turned Fletch vicious. Fletch and Wilkie didn't just steal food and pick pockets. Sometimes they beat kids up for fun. A few months ago, they'd been caught by the police and sent to a work farm up north. Leo had heard a rumor they'd escaped. He'd heard that they were hiding out in an old abandoned saloon on Rincon Hill, and now here they were, back to their vicious tricks. "You can take my money," Leo said, trying not to sound as terrified as he felt. "We don't want your money," Wilkie said. The kid was a monster. He had to weigh almost 300 pounds with smooth, chubby cheeks like a baby. A baby with a steel fist. "What do you want?" Leo asked, his knees shaking. "You know," Fletch growled. Leo's heart stopped. Of course he knew. Somehow Fletch had found out about Leo's gold nugget. But how? Leo hadn't told a soul about it, except Morris, that little pest of a kid who buzzed around Leo like a fly. Leo had showed him the gold a few weeks ago. He must have blabbed about it to kids on the street, and the story had gotten back to Fletch and Wilkie. Fletch pushed Leo's face harder into the wall. "Take my money," Leo said again. "I have more than $1. Take it all." "Oh, we will," Fletch said with a rasping laugh, "but we want the gold too." "Hand it over." It was Papa's voice in Leo's head. Leo knew there was no way he could outfight these guys or outrun them. Wilkie was the fastest kid in the neighborhood, but that gold had been Papa's prized possession. Leo couldn't just give it up. "No," Leo said, summoning up all of his strength. He whirled around and broke free from Fletch's grip. He made it about 3 steps before Wilkie caught him on the back of the shirt and threw him onto the ground. Slam! Leo landed hard, biting his tongue. "Hand it over," Fletch shouted in his creepy, strangled voice. "No," Leo yelled again. What happened next only took a minute. Wilkie picked Leo up by his shirt, holding him in the air as Fletch emptied Leo's pockets. Then they threw him into a pile of garbage and walked away laughing. Leo's head throbbed and blood dribbled from his mouth, but the worst was the searing pain from somewhere deep inside him, like something had been ripped out of him. His gold was gone. All right, so that's all we're going to read today, but if you go to the next folder, there's more if you want to keep listening.